All right. Okay, good morning, everybody. So as indicated, I am Odile Smith. I am part of the BMS family, and I've been so for 5 years, and I lead, and I have the privilege to leading our Devens, Massachusetts site. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a bit about BMS, so you understand the context in which we transformed. Then introduce the concept of a World Economic Forum Lighthouse, and combining the two together, give you a little summary of how we achieved the denomination of being a lighthouse, a global lighthouse. So let's start with who we are. So BMS is not a new company, and it is definitively anchored on science and patient. Very important to remember, because this is really what has anchored all our work and the need for transformation that we embarked in 2024. So that mission is really to deliver. It's pretty simple, but it's actually very hard to achieve. It's to deliver more medicine to more patients and to do it faster. So as a company, we're basically very active in 4 main therapeutic areas: oncology, cardiovascular, immuno, and neuroscience. We have 4 different main types of modalities. There will be small molecule, biologics, cell therapies, and radiopharmaceutical. Across all these environments, basically our goal and what has been communicated to all the shareholders and the public is illustrated here in a slide that has been shared in many forums by Chris Berner, our CEO. And what BMS needs to do and is actively doing today is summarize on these 3 pillars. And they're all linked, as you can see very well, to that mission that I read to you on the previous slide. So we need to speed up our development. And the target is to cut time in half. We need to, and I'll jump to the 3rd one here, not going in order. Associated with this, our goal is 10, 30, 30. So what does it mean? 10 new molecules, 30 new indications by year 2030. This is ultimately what we're trying to do. And of course, like many companies, we want to be more cost efficient. And we have a declared objectives to cut our costs by $3.5 billion. This allows us to continue to invest more into innovation and new medicine. So if you think about this, this is the BMS scale. And now if you bring this down to our site in Devens, where I am, how does this translate and what does it mean to us? So our site is a pretty large site, and it really covers pretty much the whole value stream from process product development, clinical manufacturing for both biologics and cell therapies, as well as commercial manufacturing also for biologics and cell therapies. This is not an old site. This is a relatively new site, which had a fairly good performance and a high level of automation and good basis to itself. But what we do is complicated. It's obviously associated with manufacture, test, and release many products in the different modalities that I explained. This is across 3 different manufacturing facilities that are different in terms of technologies, size, scale, and of course the type of manufacturing. The only thing that is in common is that we have live cells in all of these buildings. They can be patient cells or they are CHO cells. But this is really the only commonalities is that we work with those. And they have very high variability in how they behave. So connecting back to the mission, this was what Devens' challenge was, how we're going to deliver more medicine to more patients faster in our context. So this is the first intro point. Now I want to switch gear a little bit and talk about the concept of a global lighthouse. So the World Economic Forum, which you're probably very familiar with from a pure economic standpoint, has partnered with McKinsey, and they have defined this concept of lighthouse. And there is a lighthouse network. You see on the picture here, you see where the lighthouses are located as of today in the world. This started in 2018, and the first lighthouses were mostly located in the US. Since 2020-ish, the shift has really been toward Asia. And if you can see now, the vast majority of the lighthouses are on that continent and not so much in the US anymore. In 2026, our site has had the privilege to be the only North American site to be accepted as a global lighthouse and is today the only biopharma site in the network. In North America, sorry, I should say. So this is a little bit about the concept, how you get there, right? What does it mean to be a lighthouse? So the lighthouse concept is basically a nomination, as I explained, but it is evaluating what you've done in terms of transformation under two axes. It is not based on what you're planning to do. This is based on actually demonstrated results. And each year, when you put your application in, it is based on the past 2-year improvements. There are quantitative measurements, as you can see here, and there are also qualitative assessments. All of this is about your own transformation. Your transformation can be in different fields. We hesitated between productivity and patient centricity, because in the shoes of a BMS employee, those are two very keen attributes, and all our work really rotates in that space. We ended up choosing to go with productivity. So this is the two elements of the story here: our company, our site, and the lighthouse denomination. How did the two join? Not by design and not initially. So we knew we had to transform based on the 3 very hard targets that BMS had set for itself. So we knew we needed to transform. There was a clear business need. This is not a story about thinking, I'm just going to evolve technology. It is not this at all. It is really driven by achieving business goals. And those business goals are linked to our mission. They're linked to the fact that Devens represents a big chunk of the landscape of our product development and supply network. And also, we didn't start with a bad situation, as I explained. So transformation was not going to be same old type of transformation. It had to be really more a little bit of a revolution in many ways. And it certainly had to be focused on how we work. So this is the business need. And the second piece of this transformation, which is not about technology, it's about people. And those two elements are certainly the most critical elements of our story. The fact that we applied to become a global lighthouse came second. When the results came and we saw that we had achieved indeed results, then we're like, maybe there is an additional benefit and becoming indeed a recognized lighthouse. But that was not the first thought. Neither was technology. So what did we do? 2024, we embarked on this journey, aggressive goals, aligned with the company goals. And we looked at our site and we're like, okay, it's a pretty diverse site. We have different areas. And for each of the areas, we selected topics, use cases, that made sense toward our bigger goal. I mentioned we have 3 large manufacturing facilities. So LSCC, SOF, and cell therapy are the code names for those. And so we had, of course, use cases into each of them. MSNT, of course, because our field is science-based. And of course, we are registered, so quality is always a big component of anything we do. And finally, process development, as well as any auxiliary support functions, such as warehouse maintenance, et cetera. So we ended up with 30 use cases over a period of about 18 months. The ones that are in the box here are the ones that we chose to put forward in our application. And they represent different areas of our campus, and they use different technology, and they deliver different type of business outcome, which is why we bundled those into our application to showcase different aspects of our business evolution. I am going to show you or describe to you briefly a few of those use cases, just to show the variety of them and what we achieved with them. I mentioned we start our value stream with process development. And so in process development associated with 50% faster development time as a BMS goal, of course, all our use cases had to be connected to this. And you can see here that through 3 main axes of evolution in silico process development, as opposed to straight wet lab experiment, we were able to really narrow down for new molecules, new assets, our design space, and really reduce the number of iterations that we normally would have to go through in order to develop the process. That cut the time from 9 months to 6 months per molecule. Of course, less time, less people. Less people also came from automating assays and automating sample preps, as well as, of course, your traditional small-scale automation in labs as well. An additional benefit of this, with less wet experiment, came on the sustainability aspect, and of course, we have less water usage. Sustainability is a big goal of ours, and this is also a recurring metric that the WEF is looking at anyway. So this was a good indication to keep in our file. Second example is in our single-use facility. This facility is biologics. It is 2,000-liter scale. It was 100% paper-based. It was paper-based because we thought it would give us speed and flexibility. And that was true. But we needed to get way faster. And so we decided to create a very different approach to batch records. And we call it the democratized batch record. And it basically requires no code and is used today for every single clinical or commercial asset that we make in this facility. What this allowed us to do is to be ready to introduce a new asset in 10 days as opposed to 2 months prior to this, because as you well know, there is a ton of documents to be generated when you bring a new asset in. This also allows direct data translation and transition from development to this facility back and forth. When the batches are executed, our review time, which is solely review by exception, is of course cut quite a bit in terms of duration. All of this opens up capacity in our facility and allows us to bring in even more assets. Since the creation of this facility and the launch of this facility in about 8 years, there has been over 50 different products that have transitioned through the facility. So each year we have about 12 or so new molecules on top of the commercial molecule. So big savings there, and more specifically around the speed and the fact that we don't have to do any validation as we bring a new asset in this facility. Another example is more around pure process work and with the use of AI and machine learning. And so we've deployed this with our largest volume, biologics, which is a very complicated fusion protein. And we joke all the time that there is no biologics for it, despite being an old product, because it's so hard to make. And to this day, it has, knock on wood, it has proven to be true. But therefore, for us, it causes some problem, yield variability, lower yield than we would like to see for a very high volume product. So the focus was really on trying to stabilize the yield and the productivity out of our bioreactor, as well as limit the downstream losses, while really making sure the CQAs were in a very specific range for this protein. So we had, of course, previous models, but they were not helping us enough, as you can see. And so now we've increased the yield from 29 kGa to 42 kGa, which is very significant, which drives, of course, a lot of financial benefits and time benefits to us, frees up capacity in this facility as well. And the models really help our MS&T teams in terms of making decisions. Key decision for this biologics, which is fairly unusual, we don't harvest at a set time. So one of the key outputs is, when are we going to harvest and why? And so makes recommendation within our license parameters, of course, but this is not something we had before. I want to spend a moment on this page because I said this is a story of people. And, this where, of course, there is technology. It's a digital transformation, right? But what made it possible is really those people elements. We had to upskill pretty much everybody, different way of upskill, different capabilities to be raised up. But it was certainly an effort, and it is not only at Devens, it's across the company. An example, every employee has access to Copilot. Claude is also pretty widely used or starting to be used in the company. So there is a lot of effort done by BMS to provide those capabilities. Of course, there was a lot of training sessions. And the way we approach each of the use case is through this little circle here of an agile team, right? You had a leader of that use case, and then those additional 5 roles are absolutely critical to deliver those use cases. We did that in an agile way, which means you go very fast, you understand your problem, you go very fast to your minimum valued product, you try it with your end user, you get feedback, and you continue to improve. And you do this through small sprints. This gives you output very fast. Or if you're going to fail, you fail very fast as well. So this method is obviously a pretty known method, but very essential when you're talking digital transformation. It also allows very high adoption. And my last bullet here is all about change management. This is probably the most important things when you work in a manufacturing site. When you make test and release product, the last thing you want to hear is change, because you want to stay consistent and you certainly have to deal with the compliance. So we had to combine transformation, change with still an absolute performance to not impact any of our licenses. We are licensed pretty much across the world. So this page is really, really essential for anybody who embarks in this type of adventure. But the story is not finished, for sure, and we are continuing today. And I'll just pick two examples here of how we are using agents to continue to assist everybody, mostly in decision-making or in handling something which is very recurrent in our industry, which is deviations, right? So this first row of action is basically taking from the moment something happens all the way to the record of that deviation is ready to be approved, and putting that in agents that will help you write the statement, identify the root cause, link it to past similar events, propose your CAPAs. Of course, we stop at all of this becomes a recommendation. We have not gone the step, which is, of course, one of the next steps we need to think about as an industry to make automatically the decision. This is 100% correct, and it will be approved in the QMS system automatically. We still have people intervention, but the people intervention is much more limited at this time. It's mostly just reviewing what has been done by the agent and accepting it or not, right? Second piece, in a very different way, is what we call our self-healing agent in manufacturing. And basically, we have those little mini agents that are monitoring what's happening across the very many process parameters that we have. If something looks suspicious, sends alert, and also recommendations. Those recommendations are pulling from process descriptions, basically license information, SOP, SWIs, specifications, you name it, whole our collection of documentations to give our SME, most of the time sitting in MSNT and or in operations, a recommendation, and the alert and the recommendation. Hey, something's happening here. We suggest you do this. It doesn't do it for the same reason as the deviation. But once we get past that compliance hurdle or acceptance, then the next step is pretty straightforward to have fully automated. So far, we are at the stage of empowering the employees to make better, informed, and faster decisions in those two spaces. Those are just examples of how we've expanded from what we created 2 years ago. And as mentioned, the next expansion is really in the interaction with the health authorities and how we can go even a step further. So with this, I'm going to close here. I see my time is up, indeed. Yes, sure. There's one hand.
So first of all, outstanding. And
Thank you.
thank you for telling such a compelling story. I really, really appreciate it. So if I gave you a magic wand, which part of the process has been the most difficult in? And I'll give it to you later.
I wish I wish you had one. No, I think what I would say in terms of doing it differently is BMS is a large company. And of course, it has global functions and it has local teams as well. And I think the area where we've struggled the most, and in 2 years we didn't deliver nearly as much as any of the other areas, and we're really it now, so that's why I know this is base. Because what I showed you about the deviation, we had that vision from the start. But what was happening, you had local teams that wanted to do certain things very much in the same way we did a lot of the other elements, even though they are now scaled and scalable across the network. And at the same time, you had global quality, which owned the global process of deviation. We said, no, you cannot do this. We're going to do this globally. This led to 2 years of no results. So now we are redoing this all with a global approach, if I can use that term, where the local team is in the driving seat in that circle with the global team, and we're doing a pilot, a joint pilot. But it could have been that way from the start. It wasn't. And I think this is the one area where we didn't have the right level of alignment at the leadership, and that led to initial failures, to be honest.
All right, thank you, Odile, for your amazing talk.
Thank you.
Mhm.